Okay, this is part 2 of week 10, and I'm going to go over how to get started with your board designs project. Okay, so I have the assignment handout here, and I've gone over this in, I believe it was week 9, and we talked about, what the expectations are. So for this project, you'll be designing 3 board designs. One board design based on images, one based on vector graphics, and one based on typography. Okay? And I've also posted some student samples, so there's a student gallery on this, so you can take a look at what students have done in the past. And let's go ahead and jump into Photoshop and look at how to get started. Okay, now I have provided you with this master file here, which has all of the shapes of the board designs. There's the surfboard, the skateboard, and the snowboard. And you can choose which one you'd like to do. Over here, I have an example of another student project that was finished, and we're going to talk about how to kind of get set up and how I'd like for you to turn in your projects to me. Okay, so taking a look at this one here, and I'll go ahead and pull it out so that you can see it at large here. So okay, so looking at this project that this student did here, and let's look at the layers panel right here. Okay, so basically what you're going to do is you're going to set up a document in Photoshop that is going to house all 3 of your designs. Okay, so when you turn this in to me at the end, you're going to turn in one file, and inside that Photoshop file, you're going to have, if you can kind of see my layers here, you're going to have 3 layer groups. Okay, inside those layer groups, well, first of all, you want to name those layer groups your 3 different designs. So this one over here is the student's vector design. You can turn it on and off there. So I labeled that layer group vector. This one in the middle is the student's type design. So I labeled that one type. And then this one on the end is the student's image design based on images, and I have created a layer group for that. Okay, and they're all sitting next to each other and they're nice and aligned. If I bring up my guides here, you could see if I pull this guide down and this guide here, you can see they're nice and aligned and centered on the page. So this is what I'm looking for when you turn in your projects to me. And why am I such a stickler about this kind of thing? Because basically this is part of presentation. So if you needed to print this out or you needed to prepare this for a digital picture to send off to a client, you can easily just create a JPEG of this and off it could go. And all your designs would be in one file. Okay, so it's a lot easier to manage than to have 3 separate files, and then you'd have to open up 3 files and somehow put them next to each other to compare the designs to each other or to see them as a series. Keep in mind that this design project is based on the idea that this is a series. So you can kind of see with this student's designs here, they don't all look exactly the same, but there's enough similarities in terms of color and image that they look like a series, look like they kind of go together. Okay, even though one's more vector dominant, one's more type dominant, and one's more image dominant, they still look like they go together as a series. Okay, so I'm going to go through how to actually set up your document, how I just showed you. Now if I turn these down, you'll see inside here are all of the layer graphics that go with each one of these. And you see here that the actual board shape is being used in here, and I'm going to talk about how to get that set up as well. So you can sort of see here, each one of these has the graphics and the shape design for that particular board. Okay? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move this down here because we'll probably refer back to that. And let's get started. Okay, so basically what you want to do is start a new document in Photoshop. So what we're about to go over is how to start your new document for your board design. Okay, And you'll pull down the preset up to US paper, and it'll set this up at 8.5 by 11, and you are going to have to work in the portrait format here, and you're going to want to change the resolution to 150 and leave this at RGB, and I would suggest working with a white background. So you'll go ahead and say OK, and that will give you a blank white document. Okay, so I'm going to move this white document over here, so I kind of have it next to this document. So I've got two files open right now. I've got my master file, which is your shapes, and then I have the untitled document that I just made right here. Okay? All right, so the first thing you want to do is select your shape. So I'm going to, for purposes of this demo, I'll just go ahead and use the snowboard design, and I just grab the magic wand, and I click on that and I select it. See how it put a selection around that shape? Okay. And let me see if I can, first I got to float these windows so that I can actually do this. I'm going to float all windows so that I can move these around. Okay, so here is here's my blank document, here's my shape file. Okay, once I make that selection, I have to go back to the move tool, and I can grab that shape and I can move it over here into this document. Okay, so now in my blank document I have my shape. Here it is. I can move it around, just put it right there. Okay, once you get that in there, you're actually finished with this. You don't need it anymore, and you can actually close out of it. Now, I have provided you with this file in week 11. You have to download a zip file and extract it, and then you could use it it's a Photoshop document. Okay? All right, so I'm going to close out of this now that we're done, and we're now working with this file. Okay, once you get that complete, you can come over here and you can hold down the Option key and drag down this layer here. Oops, and you'll get like a double arrow. You see how I get like that double arrow? I'm going to go right there. It's hard for me to get that double arrow. Okay, well, I guess you can just duplicate layer. Yeah. For some reason, you just have to have the right perfect combination, but it should work where you just hold down the Option key and you get the double arrow, but it's not working. So there's always 6 ways to do things. You just right mouse click and duplicate the layer. So basically I've duplicated it 3 times. And I'm just going to double click and say 1 and rename these 2 and 3. Just for purposes of, you know, naming these so that I know that they're separate. And I'm going to select number 1 and put number 1 over here. So I'm basically just setting up my design here, and then 2's in the middle, and then 3 will be on the other side. So I kind of have something going on like this. Okay, now what I would suggest doing is maybe pulling down a couple guides so that you can get this aligned just right, left and right. It looks like we need to center it, all of these, so I'm going to go ahead and select all 3 of them and group, or just do a group selection. I'm not going to actually group them. I'm just selecting them for this particular move right now, and just kind of center this. Okay, so I've got this kind of centered in the middle, and it's ready to go. So what I would do at this point is I would actually create a group for each one of these. So I would select this one, and Command G is the command you can use, or you can come up here to, let's see, where is it? Group layers right here. And it'll make a group, and it'll put that layer number 1, inside of it. And I would call this image. So this is going to be your image dominant design. And let's go ahead and use the keyboard command, Command G for this one, to create a layer group here. And I'm going to select, double click it, and I'm going to call this vector. Enter. And this one here, I'm going to Command G, and I will name this layer group type. Okay? Okay, so we've got 3 layer groups, and we've got a board design in each one. Okay? Capiche? All right, good. So, now looking further at what's going on here, I'm just going to go ahead and show you what you're going to need to do to create your designs to look like this so that your work is masked inside of the shape. And you may already know how to do this, and this might be a review for you, but it's never a bad thing to hear things several times. But looking back at his layers, if I turn this down, you'll see that he has 2 shapes here. He has one shape, if I turn this one off, that is housing a clipping mask for all of the graphics. And then the other one is like an outline around all of the art, which is this black outline out here, which kind of is nice. It kind of offsets it. If I wanted to, I could select this too, and I could add and double click it and add a drop shadow. Something like that. If I wanted to make it even nicer, you know, I could soften that drop shadow a little bit so that it's, you know, make it a little bit bigger so that these pop off the page a little bit. As you can kind of see here, once you put that outline on there, it kind of looks nice because it kind of outlines the graphic, and then you could put like a nice drop shadow behind there to kind of give it a little dimension so your board designs pop off a little bit. Kind of a nice effect there. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. All right, so back to this. You've got these 3 designs ready to go. All right, so I'm going to bring in some images so that I can kind of go through how I cropped out these graphics. So let's open up some images, and I believe I have a collection of images back here on my desktop in my 14 digital imaging, over here in 11 is 10. Okay, so I've got some JPEG images I'm going to open up here that I'm going to use in my board design. So I'm going to select these 3 images and open them up in Photoshop. Oh, whoops. It accidentally opened them up in preview. I'm going to go open with Photoshop 6. Okay, so I've got some images here that I'm going to play around with here for this demonstration. So I'm again going to go to my workspace, and I'm going to float all windows so that these windows are interactive and I can float them around as I see fit. I'm just going to kind of move these down here for the time being and out of the way while I'm working here. Okay, so I've got this example still here. I want to show you this before we get started. This is one that I was experimenting with before I started the lecture. And whoops, I didn't want to do that. Okay, so this is a design I did. Whoops. Just real quick. Oh, I didn't want to do that either. Command Z that. Sorry about that. All these windows are getting a hold of me here. Okay. So in this one, this is my image dominant, and you can kind of see here how I'm starting to work with effects and images and textures, and I'm even bringing in letter form in and adding some effects to it and giving it kind of a logo design down here. It's kind of nice. Because it's just a kind of a generic looking textural design, but adding that feature of like a logo design at the bottom. Perhaps my surfboard company or my snowboard company is, you know, called Snowy Boards or something. It starts with an S. So I made a little kind of a logo design, and I popped it at the bottom, and it kind of looks nice. It looks a little bit embossed, and there's some fun things going on. So how did I do that? Well, you can kind of see here, I've got those 3 images that I just opened up, these 3 back here, and I brought all those images in, and then I'm using the board design, the black master board that you brought in, as a clipping mask, and I'm masking them out. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Again, I don't want to make this video too long, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I at least want to give you an idea of what I'd like you to do and how to set up your stuff. All right, so I'm going to go into the image layer group here, and I'm going to bring in these images. So come over here, do select all, and bring these images into my Photoshop document and drop them into the image. I'm going to close them once I get them in, and grab this one, drop it in. Okay, it's in there. Okay, and let's just select A here and drop this one in. Okay. All right, so let's close out. And I'm really not working with these, so I'm going to turn them off for the moment. Okay. All right, so first of all, these images are gigantic, and I'm going to work with this image first. Okay. And let me open this up so that we can look at this in a bigger. Okay, so first of all, these images are gigantic, so I'm going to have to do some scaling. So as we discussed early on in the class, there's a couple ways to scale things. You can either come over here and use the edit transform, and you can scale things from here, or the easiest way is just to make sure you're selected on the layer over here and hit Command T. And notice that if I Command minus this down, you can kind of see, let me open up to the pasteboard here, you can see this image is gigantic. I mean, because it's way out here. If I move it into view here, you can kind of see that I have, you know, this big image that I'm working with. So I'm going to hold down my shift key to constrain the image. And again, some of you got marked off for this on the first project. So it's very important that you hold down the shift key while you size images. And I'm going to size these down appropriately. Now again, just like on the first project, you're going to keep track of all your image resources, because you will have to provide a bibliography for this project as well. So make sure that if you borrowed images off the internet, which I did in this case, that you keep track of the citations for that. And I've got it now to a manageable size, just by scaling it from the corner here, holding down the shift key. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and I think I can work with this. So what I'm trying to shoot for here, you know, is to kind of set that up, that kind of winding road. You see that kind of windy path that was created by either a snow ski or a snow, what do you call those things? Jet ski or whatever. Not a jet ski. I can't remember what they're called. You can ride around in the snow. But anyway, it looks like something created this pathway, and I kind of want it to be sort of in the middle of my board design, sort of like this. Okay. Now, if you can't really tell what you're doing, you can easily at this point, okay, set yourself up to do a clipping mask of this. So to be able to do that, you first have to move your shape below the image itself, okay, and then holding down the Option key, and we did this on the, I think it was on the first project. Holding down the Option key, you click on this kind of grayish line here, and you get that, okay, I'll take it off for a minute. You hold down the Option key, and you click on this gray line here, and it will mask that image inside of your board design. So you can kind of see how I'm trying to shoot to have this path sort of in the middle, and I've got this blue sky up here, and that's kind of looking good. I like that, you know. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move some of these other images up above here, above the clipping mask area, because I want to work them into the idea here. And let's see, I'm going to turn on this one. So I'm going to again hold down my Option key, and I'm going to include this one in the clip. Now you don't really see it because it's actually hiding behind the image of the outdoor image there. Now you could use, you know, a couple blending options here, which is probably what I'm going to use. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to double click this layer, and it brings up blending options. Okay, and without using any of these filters over here or these styles, I'm just going to select on this top region called blending options. You can select on these and adjust these if you want, but we're just going to use the blending options. You just click it up at the top. And the blending options are nice for actually revealing multiple photos that are on top of each other and creating kind of like a layering effect. And if you kind of slide this slider here, you can start seeing that effect happening. Let's see, right here. You got to play around here. You can sort of see, depending on, you know, what position these are in the area. I'm going to hold down my Option key here and break these apart and see. I'm not necessarily getting what I want here. So let me see if I can pull that. Yeah, I kind of get a darkening, but it's really not giving me what I want. So I'm going to play around here with some of these others. Let's see, darkening, no. Dissolve, no. Let's see, overlay. Yeah, I don't really like any of these either. Well, you know, that's kind of looking cool, but you know, you can play around with some of this stuff. I'm going to leave it on normal though. But it's really not doing what I wanted. So I'm going to cancel on this because I don't think it's doing what I want. I want to see if I change the order of these, okay? Put that on top of that. Okay. Oh, no wonder it wasn't working because I actually had that layer turned off. And let me try blending options on this one. Okay, let's see. Yeah, it's not doing what I want either. Okay, let's see. Okay, so that's not doing what I want either. So I'm going to go ahead and put it back to the way it was. Okay, now it's, I guess the reason it wasn't working before is I had that layer turned off. Sorry about that. Okay, so now can we get this to work? Let's see. Maybe on this side. I start seeing something happening here. Opacity might also be something you can work with here. Multiple. You know, I just don't understand why this is not working. Okay, you know, this is the kind of stuff that happens during demonstrations and I tried this, but now all of a sudden it's not working. So let me try it on this one. Yeah. All right, now that's giving me a little bit of something coming through there. Not quite what I want. Let's see, that's doing a little bit. If I hold down the Option key, it doesn't really do much. And that's, again, that's on the normal. Advanced blending. Ah, here we go. Okay, now we're starting to get something to show up here where you can kind of start manipulating this. So, okay, now I'm starting to get what I want. And then I can hold down the Option key and, okay, I see. All right. So basically, you can play around with this. And again, there's really no science to this. As you sort of saw, I was kind of messing around to sort of get this to work. But basically what I ended up doing is I started adjusting my advanced blending, and it started merging those two images together. As you can kind of see back here, it's starting to bring in that texture into that photo. And it's kind of looking interesting. It's kind of got this dark areas. And I could further enhance this by holding down my Option key and pulling these little arrow things apart, and I can, you know, bring in textures, darken things, blend these things even further. I can do the same over here, as well as the underlayer. I can bring this one in. And sometimes you see things, sometimes you don't. And again, there is really no science to this stuff. You just have to play with it. But I don't really like anything I did there, so I'm just going to put all that back to the way it was. And let's play around with some more of these up here. Let's see, difference. That's kind of neat. Exclusion, no, I don't like that. Subtraction. retract, and you can kind of see how I'm starting to bring in different looks here, but just by merging these pictures. Oh, now that's interesting. Okay, so that is starting to look something like what I want. I want that kind of snowy look. You see that? Yeah, that's kind of like what I want. And I'm blending this. Oh, now even further, it's giving me an effect. You see how it's giving me that effect? I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, so I'm going to stick with this. And let me see. Let's darken that just slightly. Okay. I don't want to mess with this anymore. Okay, so I've got that effect. All right, so now let's bring in another image and sort of see what we can get with that. Let's bring in this one. Okay, and let me see. What if I put it there and turned it on? Okay, so now this one I may need to move, and it's kind of big, so I'm going to go ahead and, again, this one's gigantic, holding down my shift key. I'm sizing this down and giving myself even more texture to work with here, which is kind of fun, you know, just layering texture and image. And I might say on this one, maybe I just want okay, I may want to move it up. So I think I might want to move this one. Okay, let's go ahead and say enter, because I like that size. And then I might want to move it up above this. Okay, and let me see if I change the opacity of this. Yeah, okay, so I've got this opacity change. Yeah, it's kind of neat. If I give it a little bit, if you can kind of see, it's now bringing in some circle texture here, which is sort of neat. I don't want it to be so gray though, so I think I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a color overlay to this. And when I click on color overlay, it's putting like a red color on there, but I don't want red, I want blue. So I'm going to come over here and get a blue. And you see how this is starting to really punch back here? And I'm creating this really neat effect with this board design. And this is going to be my image dominant, you know, as I pull to these darker colors, and it gets even darker. If I go to a lighter blue, it gets bluer. Some gray. So I kind of like this right here. Maybe I like that. Okay. So I'm kind of, you know, and I could adjust the opacity of that as well, as I also have different options for, you know, creating other kinds of looks with these blend modes. Okay, so you know, there's so many different things you can do here. You can just play and get different effects, and I kind of still like that. I'm just going to put it on normal. Okay. Now I can also come back in here and go to my blending mode, and I can further enhance this. Let's see. It's not going to. Okay, I think I have to adjust. Yeah, let's come down here on this one and see if I adjust this one. Yeah, there we go. Now it's kind of, okay. So anyway, you kind of get the gist of what I'm doing here. I'm kind of playing around with this. And every single time I do this demonstration, I come up with a different result with this. And sometimes I like them, sometimes I don't. If you want it to be more about the texture, you can almost obliterate that scene altogether and bring in more texture. It kind of looks like that. But I don't know, I don't think I like that. Okay. All right, so, you know, it's kind of coming along here, and I've got all this stuff in my image dominant one. Now, if I needed to, I could bring in, you know, some text. Maybe I had a logo that I'm working with. And, you know, I'm going to go ahead and increase the size of this a little bit so you can kind of see this up close. This was one that I had done. This one over here is one that I had done in another demonstration. You can kind of see the overall effects are different, but I really like what's happening with those textures back there. It's kind of looking really cool, a lot better than that straight photo that I had in there originally. So if I come in here and I just set a character, like like a G. Ah, I don't like that typeface, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to use a thick typeface because the thicker the typeface, the more fill I have to manipulate. So something like a Gill Sans, something real thick like that is good. And I'm going to change the color to like a gray. Okay. And you can kind of see here, I'm going to also increase the size to about 60. Okay. How this is already taking on an effect like already blending in. And if you want to take it out of that completely, you can move it out up here, out of the clip, so that it's not being clipped and it's not behind those images. So now I kind of have it here. I can manipulate this even further, and I can add, you know, text effects to this. I believe I just threw an emboss on there, and I pulled back some of the on the emboss. I believe I pulled back some of the opacity. Maybe no. Yeah, it's kind of like that. Did I have a contour? You know, maybe I don't know what I did here. You just got to play around with this. Yeah, here we go. If you come in here and you adjust the blending mode, so I put an emboss and a contour on it, but then I came back into the blending mode up here at the top, and I pulled back the opacity, and now it kind of looks like it's punched out, which I kind of like. And now I have kind of like a watermark in a sense. And this could be one way to create a watermark on your images. And, you know, I originally had a little exercise as part of that scrapbook where you created a watermark, but I thought maybe I would incorporate it into this because it's sort of, you know, more creative, and that scrapbook was more technical. So, you know, you can play around with this and you can do some really great things, but there you go. There's my image dominant board design. Okay, so the last thing you need to do before you finish up on these is to select that masked, that clipping mask layer, which is the shape of your board, and you're going to hold down the Option key and drag it down to get the double arrow, as I got that time, and duplicate it, and then you'll double click it and you're going to call this outline. Oops. Okay. All right, so now we're going to add an outline around this board to give it that pop that I was talking about earlier. If you go back and look at this black outline here. Okay, so I'm going to select the outline layer here, and I'm going to use something called a stroke. So I'm going to go up under the edit and pull down to stroke. And I'm going to change the color to solid black, and I'm going to give it about a 6 pixel stroke. And I'm going to do that to the outside. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say okay, and you can sort of see there, maybe that's a little bit too bold, so I'm going to Command Z that, and I'll come back over here and go to edit stroke, and let's make that 4 instead. There you go. Okay, so now we've got a nice stroke, and if I wanted to, I can easily come in here and put a, you know, pop a drop shadow on there, and click on the drop shadow and kind of, you know, kind of soften it a little bit and turn it down just slightly, and there you go. And turn off my guides, and you've got one board design ready to go. Okay, so that is the end of this demonstration, and I'll be expecting to receive from you just one Photoshop file, and inside that one Photoshop file you'll have all 3 of your board designs next to each other. Okay, so I guess the last thing I always say in these demos is happy Photoshopping, and if you have any questions, you can post your questions in the week 10 problems and solutions.